Now, this could just be me, but the early half of 2022 felt like it went by a little slow, good pace. The middle portion went by painfully slow, and these last few months that were in 2022 went by like a blur. And so now we're here in 2023, and the Chainsaw Man anime came out and finished in the time, and it ended, I think, where a lot of us were thinking it would end, right before Rize. And there was a whole thing where people were petitioning for a new anime, as well as this whole hatred thing against Kobeni, which, am I surprised? Not really. Do I get it? Also, no, not really. And we are also already 19 chapters in on Chainsaw Man Part 2. I've seen some people say that they prefer this already over all of Part 1, which is like, all right, hold your horses. Let's not be prisoners of the moment, as we tend to be as people. But at least I understand the sentiment. Now, I'm going to do my best to avoid spoilers and getting into the specifics of what happens before the recent chapter and sort of my thoughts on the recent chapter and what I think will happen afterwards. But, of course, that's going to be a little bit tricky. So if you're worried about getting spoiled, you might as well just leave now. I'm saying this because I got spoiled with the cliffhanger in the recent chapter, which, I mean, my boy, is it that hard? Is it that hard to use a spoiler tag in a tweet? Is it that hard? Are your little likes so necessary that you can't, Bro, y'all have no idea how much I want to drop an F-bomb. You have no idea. Anyways, Chainsaw Man Part 2 has introduced us to a new character called Asa, who has recently done a deal with the War Devil. And so now her and the War Devil are currently coinciding in the same body, and the War Devil can sort of take control over her whenever she wants, which has created this really interesting dynamic with this character who, for the most part, is very mild-mannered and a lot less aggressive than the War Devil is. Who would guess? And our main character attends a school. However, there's someone else attending this school, and that's Denji, our protagonist from Part 1 of Chainsaw Man. And the War Devil, which is currently residing inside of Asa, has the desire to kill Chainsaw Man. I think we all knew where this was going as soon as we got an idea of the conflict. There's also another character we were introduced to back in Chainsaw Man Part 1, who I think is going to be really interesting to keep an eye on based off of his behaviors, and that's Yoshida, which, if I have to see another thirst post about this man, I'm gonna lose it. I might harm something. And there was an interaction earlier where the War Devil took over Asa and then asked Yoshida if he wanted to be her boyfriend, and he just cold straight up said no, which was hilarious. Later on, Yoshida and Denji have an interaction where essentially Yoshida is warning Denji and overseeing him, and he's asking Denji, yo, why were you letting this girl sit on you? And he was trying to collect money, which the whole reason as to why he's collecting money I'll address a little more later on. But then he offers Denji some money, sits on him, not like that, stop it, you read the chapter, don't do that. And then as the conversation goes on, Yoshida eventually asks Denji, what's your type of girl anyways? And Denji says, one that's desperate for a boyfriend, which is how Denji officially gets introduced awkwardly at the top of a roof to Asa, the main character of this current part, which technically, Asa's already met him because she got saved by Chainsaw Man just before, but what I'm assuming to be the major conflict for a good portion of the story is going to be her relationship that grows with Denji, and yet her complete ignorance to the fact that he's the person that she needs to kill. Now, I've said this about Fujimoto a million times already, but he does such a great job of introducing characters and establishing their personalities in a very short amount of time. And his expertise in writing short stories always shows throughout each chapter he does. However, I also really want to point out his comedic timing in a way, as moments with Yoshida and the whole Denji interaction, and then Denji being introduced to Asa, as well as future things that will happen in the chapters that have come out, have been, I find him to have a really good way of sort of interjecting that comedy, despite the series at times being very bleak. And I don't trust this man at all. And I think part of his comedic timing was shown amazingly where Denji and Asa don't get along at all at first. And she's essentially berating his character. And he finally snaps and he's like, oh, well, what do you mean I'm not like Chainsaw Man? Guess what? I am Chainsaw Man. And she just calls him a loser and leaves. Doesn't believe him at all. I can't wait to see the interaction between the War Devil and Asa once it's sort of like this I told you so moment, because she literally like, what are you doing? He just admitted he's Chainsaw Man, and he's like, nah, Chainsaw Man would never admit that he's Chainsaw Man, which, I mean, I guess. And then a wild card is thrown into the mix when a character who made a deal with the Justice Devil who can read minds, and was able to read the mind of Asa and know what actually happened. And so as these two characters have established a friendship in the short amount of chapters, she is now hell-bent on taking care of the bullies that have been picking on Asa, which we were introduced to at the very beginning of this part 2 of Chainsaw Man. Which I will say it was a very weird move in the moment when I read it, and I wasn't sure where it was going to go with this. But the conflict we got from chapter 105 through 111 regarding the Justice Devil, and we're even introduced to the Famine Devil, so I've been seeing a lot of theories regarding the whole 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. But that entire stretch I find not only to be one of the strongest, of course, in not just Chainsaw Man Part 2 because it just started, but in all of Chainsaw Man, as we got this really sentimental conclusion to a character, which was just classic Fujimoto. Now, in that conflict with the whole Justice Devil, Asa had to make a weapon using her clothing, a uniform that her mother gave her, therefore it was something of sentimental value. However, in that conflict, the War Devil, being weakened from the lack of wars and conflicts, was struggling to beat said devil. So she can see that in her current condition, she is incapable of beating Chainsaw Man, therefore she will need a stronger weapon. Therefore, Asa will have to find something of sentimental value, of greater sentimental value, in order to create a weapon that she can use to defeat Chainsaw Man. And she's in agreement with all of this because she wants to get rid of the War Devil from inside of her as quickly as possible. Seeing the War Devil's existence will not only really bring her misery, but the people around her misery as well. And so, once again, it all rounds back to Denji when she has to find someone that she's willing to turn into a weapon. However, she can't just use a criminal because the compromise would make it easy. Therefore, there has to be a little bit of a moral conflict in doing so, finding someone between cat and criminal, as the story says. And so she sees Denji sort of cleaning up cigarette parts, and at first it's like, he's actually a good guy, even though he's a loser, until she sees him sort of take these old cigarettes and then make them into fake new cigarettes, ripping off homeless people. And so then she's like, oh no, well, never mind, he's a piece of crap. However, he's the perfect candidate for what she needs in order to turn into a weapon. Oh boy, little does she know. So the War Devil basically tells her, like, look, just do what you have to do, even if you think it's evil. It's going to be a necessary evil in order to get rid of a nightmare. So she approaches Denji and asks him out on a date. And what does Denji say, of course? Well, he says yes. So the two end up going to a date on this aquarium, and Denji's, like, really hellbent on wanting to see these penguins, but Asa just won't shut up about this super long explanation regarding fish and sea urchins and starfish and all that. And so he's just like why can't I go? And she's like, we'll have fun as long as we stick to my plan. And this might seem rather minuscule, but instead of Denji just staying there, he eventually just like, nah, whatever, I'm doing what I want, I can think for myself, and leaves. Which I'm not sure if this was Denji from who we were introduced to in part 1 would have done that. Again, just showing how far he's grown as a character, and some of the callbacks we get to part 1 and some of the relationships he's had with previous characters is a little bit painful, especially one in particular. But once Denji leaves, then the Famine Devil reintroduces herself, and actually introduces herself properly as the Famine Devil, or Fami, the older sister of the War Devil, saying that essentially Denji doesn't know the difference between right and wrong, and you couldn't turn Denji into a weapon, you can't. So, guess what, you're not going to leave this aquarium until you turn him into a weapon. And so now, Denji and Asa are stuck together in this aquarium with a couple other people, but this gives them time to sort of interact and talk as characters. They're even starving, so they cook some of the fish and cook, quote unquote, and eat them, and they have these really fun interactions. And we even get introduced to Kobeni's brother, who I saw some very interesting fan art of. Anyways, when we see Asa and Denji sitting together, she asks him why there's so many school hats there, and he talks about selling them for money, and she finally springs a very important question about why he's so obsessed with money. And he's saying that he basically has this little sister living with him that's smart enough to go to college, and he wants her to have a good life, saying that his life was pretty crappy and he wants her to live a normal life. Which, if you go back to the final chapter of Chainsaw Man Part 1, you can see the sort of goal that Denji was given by Pochita regarding Nayuta, the new vessel for the Control Devil. The two of them then have a wholesome interaction, as I think Asa's starting to see that Denji is not the person she assumed him to be. And her insecurity about being boring comes out as she nervously says, after he calls her interesting to watch, that she's fun and that he has a good eye for noticing, and screaming that she's charming, isn't she? And this moment was really special, where Denji says, I like that attitude, reminds me of an old friend. And so while this is a new part in the story of Chainsaw Man, it's doing an amazing job of building off of the back of what was previously established and really showing us how far Denji's character has matured, and I think will continue to mature while still being Denji with his flaws. The two of them then collect a ton of money, and Asa makes a weapon called the Aquarium Spear in hopes of defeating the devil that is currently having him trapped. And so they, with the help of Yoshida, they defeat the devil, and so Famine's plan kind of goes to crap, and they're all now free from the aquarium. Denji gets to see a penguin, and so we see Denji and Asa once again together, and this time Denji asks her to fulfill a request, which is to go out on another date with him. The War Devil now intervenes and says, well, I'm guessing this feeling has to be love, and so the plan will work. And then we get a crazy cliffhanger where the War Devil takes over Asa again, walks up to Denji, puts her hand on his head, and goes, Denji spinal cord sword. Look, as a Berserk fan, I'm used to my fair share of cliffhangers regarding chapters. But this is... The sky's the limit with this. Who knows what's going to happen next? We're really getting more than just a conflict between two characters. We're getting a bit of a three-way conflict where Asa's sentiments towards Denji and her desires towards him are going to be completely different than what the War Devil wants, especially when considering that Denji is indeed Chainsaw Man, and so therefore if that reveal were to happen next, or if his identity were to be safe a little bit longer, what could possibly happen? Now, I also did recently watch Pulp Fiction, which I'm not saying it's going to go down this route, but you know how like in Pulp Fiction, Vincent is sort of established as our main character a little bit, the one that we follow through the beginning portion of the movie until it eventually switches to Butch's perspective, and so then Butch has an interaction and is the one that kills Vincent, and then we continue on with his story for a sector of the movie. Look, I'm not saying that Asa's going to kill Denji, and then so Denji's character comes to a close, and then, especially considering that Denji has a few things that I think need to be resolved with his character, especially the whole situation regarding Nayuta, but there's that lingering feeling that Fujimoto's going to pull something a little crazy, and, you know, just ignore me. I'm throwing a little wrench of anxiety in your brain. But as soon as I saw everybody talking about, oh, these two seem so happy together, I hope nothing bad happens. Shut up. You knew exactly what was going to happen. You knew exactly where this was going. Now, usually when theorizing about its story, especially regarding certain authors, you can kind of see where everything has been building up to in the direction in which it's going to go, especially if it's a story that has continued one singular narrative with one main character. But with Chainsaw Man, and more specifically Fujimoto, he's really good at doing things in moments where we least expect it, and characters doing and saying things which I honestly couldn't see coming. So regarding what's going to happen in the next chapter and the preceding conflict afterwards, I'm not sure. But the sky is the limit, and I'm really excited to see what sort of things he's going to build up with not only just Asa and Denji, but some of the other characters that I see to be real wild cards like the Famine Devil and Yoshida. And so even though I think Chainsaw Man Part 1 had a really good start, I think the strongest parts of the series for me really did come near the middle and the end of the series, and I think the same will be said for Chainsaw Man Part 2. But if I had to compare the first sort of 20 chapter stretch of Chainsaw Man Part 1 and Part 2, I would agree that I think Chainsaw Man Part 2 has gone off to a much more intriguing start for me, but again, I think that's simply because it's building off of the back of the character growth that we've seen from Part 1, especially regarding Denji. Well, really only regarding him because he's one of the only characters left from Part 1. But as always, let me know your thoughts about Chainsaw Man at the current moment and where you think the story is going to go. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and turn on the bell notifications. That way you're notified whenever a new video comes out. Some of your favorite anime, manga, whatever content. As always, this has been The Masked Man. Hope everyone has a blessed rest of the day, and peace.